Do we have some law students in the house? Yes, law students. Do we have any psychology students in the house? Oh my God, psychology, could you please do that again? Do we have any psychology students in the house?
of our time. A very warm welcome to you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, VC. So following our first conversation earlier this year on intimacies, ethics, and ecologies in AI use, I welcome you to this second VC's conversation on artificial intelligence in higher education. This is not a separate conversation, but one which builds on our last discussion. Much of what we are learning about these new relationships, blind spots, and consequences emerge from improvisation, experiments, and classic trial and error as we work it out. During creative meanders with my AI to explore research pathways, I have been offered intriguing and delicious-sounding journal articles and chapters to refer to, but when looking to locate them, have discovered that they simply don't exist. But my AI is giving me exactly what I want to receive, whether it is real or not. I've also found using my AI in editorial processes reduces the time needed for work. That's delicious too. I see this in our teaching and learning practices. One of the first things I do now when marking assignments is to check bibliographies for hallucinated references. I am no longer telling students not to use AI. That would be like trying to turn back the tide. I am instead instructing them on the ethics and necessity of thorough and meticulous fact-checking against hallucinations in the sources they cite, and the absolute imperative of finding those primary sources to verify them. And yes, dear students, read them. I'll let that sink in. AI starts with what we know. If we blithely trust its responses without critical engagement, we not only outsource our cognition, rewiring our brains in ways that we are only just beginning to understand, we also risk offering to the world work that is a blatant fabrication. This is the new plagiarism. Not the stealing of another's ideas, but the fabrication of truth in order to perform competency without substance. This reverberates beyond the university classroom, affecting the legislation drafted to manage all our affairs. In April, the Department of Home Affairs suspended 2 senior officials following the detection of apparent AI hallucinations cited as references in a recently cabinet-approved revised white paper on citizenship, immigrant, and refugee protection. Let's hope that didn't inform the March to March movement's ideologies. In a supreme irony, South Africa withdrew its first draft national AI policy earlier this year, shortly after our first conversation, after revelations that it contained fictitious sources in its reference list, which appeared to have been AI generated. The rise of AI spam, fake legislation, and fake news may be leading to a growing distrust of social media platforms and their content, but equally, our chosen AI platforms are becoming a place to share our secrets and confidences. A study by Kostka and Zoe revealed chatbots were the top choice for secret sharing for 20.94% of 7,027 respondents from Germany, China, and our own dear South Africa. Take a moment now to consider. Have you used your preferred platform to get advice or to confide? Polling commissioned by a mental health charity in the United Kingdom reveals that chatbots are increasingly filling gaps left by overstretched mental health services, but also the appeal of not having to deal with the messy realities of human face-to-face contact. Usage was among 64% among 25 to 34-year-olds, and even 15% of those aged 55 and over report having turned to AI chatbots for help. In our own continent, a recent report in The Lancet, a multilingual AI mental health chatbot has 500,000 users across West Africa in local languages, providing cognitive behavioral therapy techniques in Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo, addressing Nigeria's severe shortage of mental health professionals. In a recent conversation with my own mother, who turns 80 next year, she told me she'd been enjoying chatting with Copilot. Aside from mobilizing me to call a bit more often, I did wonder at this extraordinary turn to humanize machine interactions and the seductions of hearing what you want to hear when you want to hear it. With no pithy answers, we must, in our capacity as scholars and emerging scholars, do what we do best: question, explore, experiment, and critically engage. Oh yes, and just for the record, I actually didn't use AI to write this. And that's actually a bit of a change, because I've started using it a lot to edit my stuff. And what's happening as I experiment with it is that I'm starting to learn that sometimes my own brain is actually more efficient. I'm thus delighted to introduce our distinguished panelists. Professor Charles Maimela is the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of Johannesburg. He is a professor of law in the areas of medical law and African customary law, and has published extensively in these fields. He has also written on AI and the law, and how it shapes curriculum transformation of the teaching and research of law in universities today. We are also delighted that Professor Maimela has donated his honorarium for this evening's event to the RU Law Faculty's NADISA Fund to support students in the law faculty. Our second panelist, Professor Megan Campbell, is an associate professor and counseling psychologist based in our own Rhodes University Psychology Department. She has over 30 accredited publications with work focusing on the areas of psychological health and distress, assessment and tool translation for cross-cultural use, community engagement, ethics, and mental health stigma, as well as building couple therapy interventions on the African continent. Our very own Esther Perel. Thank you. Martina Della Tonia is a filmmaker and PhD candidate with over 24 years of experience as a film producer. Our third panelist spent 5 years in the South African Parliament as its first multimedia manager for her sins, leading to the overhaul of external communication strategy in support of public participation in legislation and oversight. She is pursuing her PhD here at Rhodes University's School of Journalism and Media Studies, drawing on that experience in Parliament and the institutional information disorder that occurred during state capture, to consider the intentional production of disinformation and navigating AI use in her own scholarly process. I will now invite our panelists one by one to share their insights with us, and once they have done so, we'll open the floor to questions and engagements from our wonderful audience. So please, if you need to check your AI for a question, go for it. You're welcome. But let's have those questions going, yeah? Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. Molweni. Dumelang. Se gae wena, no? Ke tsamaya le wena ke tsamaya. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Goeienaand. Have I covered everyone? Sorry? Just about. Da. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Program Director. Thank you very much to the Dean of Humanities. I don't know why you invited me, but I am a Methodist member, that's a Wessel. I saw the invitation as the finger pointing at you. So I acceded to the invitation, and thank you very much to you, Dean, and to the colleagues for receiving me. Vice Chancellor, thank you very much as well for the opportunity to speak at this prestige engagement of Rhodes University. Quite a beautiful campus you have here. I took a drive in the afternoon and appreciated the beauty, and I hope the students appreciate it and value, but most importantly, grow this great institution to greater heights. To the law students who are here this evening, I'm told I'm the draw card. That's why you are here in numbers. Today I dedicate my labor to you, and that's why I decided to leave the small token of appreciation that I received from this institution to plow it back to you and to say to you, it's in your hands and make it happen. Ladies and gentlemen, my time is quite limited, but as you know, I'm a university administrator as a dean, but I never forget my true calling, which is the academic project. So please bear with me today as I expose my hunger for engaging in academic discourse due to the administrative burden that I often find myself in. The title of my address today is Artificial Intelligence in South African Universities, Curriculum Transformation and Decolonization, Aid or Obstacle, you decide. The interpretation or the integration of artificial intelligence in higher education, colleagues, is a growing phenomenon worldwide, with universities leveraging AI-driven technologies for teaching, learning, research, and administration. And South Africa is no different at all. In South Africa, these shifts coincide with broader curriculum transformation discourse or inclusivity discourse, as one would argue, which seek to address historical inequalities in higher education and redefine knowledge production. While AI has the potential to enhance learning through personalized education, intelligent tutoring systems, and predictive analytics, among other things, concerns persist regarding its Western-centric biases, epistemic injustices, and accessibility disparities. I aim to examine this evening, ladies and gentlemen, the role of AI in South African universities within the framework of curriculum transformation and decolonization, but we are not here to debate the two. Our main focus is curriculum transformation and inclusive higher education, and ask an important question as to whether does AI serve as an aid or an obstacle in attaining these goals. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to just give a brief synopsis and context. As you know, in our time, we've experienced two disruptions in higher education. One is the hashtag fees must fall, and two, the COVID-19 pandemic. These were the two disruptions which exposed us as universities that we are reactionary rather than proactive entities. Artificial intelligence in South African universities, one would call it, is the integration of this system in South African universities has been a progressive journey, which reflects a broader commitment to technological advancement in higher education. However, determining the exact time of AI's initial adoption in South Africa, in South African universities, is quite a challenging task due to the fact that it's not documented, among other things, and only with these two disruptions that I've mentioned, one would say we have seen the acceleration in terms of embracing as well as grappling with AI interventions. But I want to inform you that the AI innovations started in the higher education landscapes. We are able to trace it from the late 1990s. And we have universities that has made great inroads in relation to the role of AI. And to name but a few, you have University of Pretoria, Witwatersrand, and recently we have seen also the University of Johannesburg with its launch on the AI and the Law Institute, among others. These universities focus on areas like machine learning, natural language processing, and robotics, laying the groundwork for AI's role in academia. Over the years, AI adoption has transcended technical faculties, permeating various aspects of university operations. AI-driven tools are now employed to enhance personalized learning experiences, automate administrative tasks, and analyze student performance data, among other things. And that's why today in universities, we speak of predictive analysis. We look at the data in order for us to be able to plan for the future. And these are AI engagement and provide virtual support, ensuring continuity in education during unprecedented times. However, you would remember also the human effect during this period. We have seen a great deal of our students and staff suffering from psychological traumas and pain due to online fatigue, among other things. And this also is a fundamental aspect for you to take into account, that at the center of it all, the human being must be the main character rather than AI taking center stage. Despite these developments, the implementation of AI in South African universities is not without challenges. Issues such as digital inequality, data privacy concerns, and ethical considerations persist. The disparity in technological infrastructure between well-resourced and historically disadvantaged institutions aggravates existing inequalities, potentially limiting the benefits of AI to a portion of the student population. Moreover, the ethical dimension of AI, including potential biasness in systems and handling of sensitive data, necessitate development of comprehensive policies. Current higher education policies in South Africa often lack explicit guidelines addressing these concerns, emphasizing the need for a robust policy framework that ensures responsible AI use. This calls for higher education as a sector to collaborate rather than compete, because that's the order of the day. Who is number one? But AI is saying to all of us, we need to collaborate in order for us to emancipate humanity. While AI holds a significant promise for transforming South African higher education by enabling learning outcomes and operational efficiencies, its integration must be approached thoughtfully, addressing infrastructural disparities, ethical issues, and policy gaps is crucial to harnessing AI's potential as a tool for inclusive and equitable education. What is the problem, and why are we engaging with this AI at Rhodes University this evening? The integration of AI, as we know it, in South African universities presents both opportunities and challenges for curriculum reform and an inclusive institution. While AI can enhance teaching, learning, and research, its adoption is uneven across 27 public universities, with, for example, historically white universities as well as historically black universities, among other things, because they face financial and technological barriers, among other things. This disparity reinforces existing inequalities and deepens epistemic divides. AI technologies are largely developed within Western paradigms and often excluding African epistemologies and indigenous knowledge systems. This raises concerns about cultural bias and digital colonialism, as AI may reinforce Eurocentric curriculum instead of supporting a reformed curriculum. Additionally, movements like #VisMustFall and disruptions of the COVID-19 pandemic have highlighted systemic inequities, emphasizing the need for inclusive AI policy. And we know with the draft framework on AI what happened in the country. The address, ladies and gentlemen, this evening aims to examine whether AI is an aid or a hindrance in achieving an inclusive and transformed curricula for the university sector today. In addressing this, allow me to borrow the theoretical perspective theory called the diffusion innovation theory, developed by a scholar, Rogers, who explains how new ideas and technologies, as well as practices, spread within a social system. According to Rogers, this theory posts or positions innovative adoption occurs through a process influenced by individual, organizational, and societal factors. According to this framework, is widely used to analyze technology adoption in education, including the integration of artificial intelligence in university curricula. And this entails five-pronged approach. One, knowledge. We need exposure to innovation and its functionalities. Two, persuasion, formation of a positive or negative attitudes towards innovation. It happens in the academy. Some academics are for AI, others are not for AI, others are in the middle. Three, decision, commitment to adopting or rejecting innovation. Four, implementation, application of the innovation in real contexts. Context is very fundamental. The AI systems that you're going to adopt at Makanda must be a reflection of this community, must be able to carry the moral fabric of this community in order for it to be functional. Confirmation, reinforcement or discontinuation of the innovation based on outcomes. According to Rogers, in applying these stages, they are influenced by perceived attitudes of the innovations, such as relative advantage, compatibility, complexity, trialability, and observability, which shape adoption patterns in higher education institutions. When we sum the theory developed by Rogers pertaining to how AI and universities must approach it, it's very much clear that this theory is a useful lens for understanding the uneven adoption of AI in South African universities based on the historical context of South Africa as a whole. Due to some universities face systemic barriers that slow diffusion. For AI to contribute meaningfully to curriculum reform and inclusive universities must address policy gaps, digital inequalities, and faculty training needs, among other things. An inclusive AI strategy that aligns with South African higher education transformation goals must be promoted to champion AI as an aid rather than as a hindrance. It calls again for collaboration rather than for competition. As I move close to draw to a close in these pointers, you would also note I'm leaving you with questions and leading statements for us to have a discussion. South African universities and AI challenges today, as well as opportunities, is something which we need to be able to look at. It's a double-edged sword. Recently in Chicago Law School, they've barred the use of AI for first year until third year students, where the students will meet AI in their final stages of their studies. Because they are arguing that there is a gap, a skills gap in writing, legal reasoning, as well as research, due to over-reliance on AI. And take that into account. If America can make such a stance, and yet most of the AI systems are developed with that context, where does it leave you and I? So our context is also very important and fundamental in terms of how we make use of AI. But most importantly, as we approach AI innovations, we need to pause and reflect as institutions of higher learning as to whether are we consumers of AI or are we innovators of AI and chart the path of our destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, the AI and the transformation goal that we are all aiming for, it's very much important that we are able to ensure that the AI that we are aiming to adopt in South African universities have what we call a local context. It has the local voice. It aims to solve local problems with a positive outlook of ensuring that it takes us to a bright future. We have seen that the adoption of foreign systems without local context leads to serious challenges. And the adoption of AI or the discouragement of AI in this quite big confusion that we find in the sector rests with us as institutions of higher learning, that we need to remain in touch with the microcosm of the societies that surround us as universities. In this address, ladies and gentlemen, I argue that AI is an ongoing debate to make us arrive at the destination that we are all striving for, taking into account that South Africa also comes from a very painful history when context. The biasness of AI also is something that we need to be able to guard against at all costs, because AI does not carry our language as well as our history, especially when we look at it today. But there is hope. Not all is lost. We have seen a number of innovations that come from, for example, the Masakani group that speaks or you make use of AI for the development of indigenous language, that indigenous language to form part and parcel as medium of instructions. Because it is important that we are able to incorporate indigenous languages as means of instruction, among other things. Additionally, also, colleagues, most AI ethics frameworks applied in South Africa are developed in the global north, failing to account for the country's unique socio-political context and perpetuating external epistemic influences that may not align with local educational and cultural needs. If you want to touch an individual in a lecture room, start conversing in their mother tongue. Some scholars argue that AI could be repurposed for transformative goals, for example, by developing AI models trained on African linguistic and cultural data. However, such efforts require substantial investment and policy interventions, which are currently lacking. As I draw to a close, it is important to take into account that the AI that we're all striving for as a sector, and in particular Rhodes University, needs to have an Afrocentric outlook, and with the aim to address the challenges defined is to ensure that the pressing need for an Afrocentric AI model and framework. And this model will incorporate African languages and indigenous knowledge systems and be developed with ethical frameworks that reflect socio-cultural values and priorities and prioritizes equitable access through government-funded AI infrastructure, among other things. As I close, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to indicate that AI can play as an aid rather than as an obstacle if used with wisdom, if used with care, and the human being who is at the center being also afforded and being given the dignity and value sets in terms of the language, the culture, as well as the aims and objectives of making a transformative impact in society as well as in the sector. I thank you.
So the topic of my presentation is going to be focused more around mental health. And I'm going to start off talking a bit about a podcast I watched recently by Oprah Winfrey. And she was talking about this concept of AI-related or AI-induced psychosis. Now, psychosis is a break from reality. It is our inability to share a common reality with the people around us. And it manifests through three key presentations. One is sensory disturbances and perceptual disturbances through hallucinations. The second is disorganized thinking. And the third is fixed false beliefs that we hold about the world, others, and ourselves. What we see with this concept of AI-induced or related psychosis is that these engagements that we have with chatbots over time create this break from shared reality through reinforcing these fixed false beliefs that we hold about the world around us. This is a really interesting concept. Chatbots are designed to mirror and imitate our own personal experiences without really any careful consideration for reality testing. They're designed to tell us what we want to hear, to provide the answers that we seek, working off of an improvisational model. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, what you're saying makes sense, and building on that. And AI-induced related psychosis is then understood as these fixed false beliefs that are reinforced over time through the feedback and the relationship that we create with these AI bots. We believe that what the AI bot is saying is true. Some of the guests on this podcast that I was watching were talking about how this very intense engagement with these chatbots over time resulted in marked behavior changes for them. They would begin isolating themselves, withdrawing from key family and friends. They would behave very defensively to any kind of feedback that challenged their perceived reality. We must remember that media sometimes sensationalizes things. So what do we currently know about this concept of AI-induced psychosis? We know that it's not currently endorsed by any psychiatric diagnosis in the DSM or the ICD. We know that there's no epidemiological or population-level studies, only individual cases at the moment that are demonstrating these very extreme responses and these fixed false beliefs. Majority of people who engage with AI chatbots actually don't develop psychosis, and they experience they feedback very positive experiences. There exists a small group of case studies where these very intense engagements with these chatbots are either accompanied by or worsen this delusional thinking that people may already sit with that may result in psychosis or more suicidal behavior. We cannot rule out pre-existing vulnerabilities or risk factors that may impact these cases, and we don't know also the impact of sleep deprivation, substance use, and predisposition to psychosis and the impact that these may have. Some of the proposed reasons why people may develop more delusional thinking when engaging with bots over time include repeated validation of a person's beliefs rather than challenging them, strong social validation, making the beliefs feel shared and therefore more real, and the accessibility that we have to these bots who are constantly available to us at any time in order to reaffirm our reality. Additionally, people seem to speak to these bots as if they have a mind of their own, as if they have some kind of intelligence that they can impart to us. And we forget that these bots are mimicking and they're replaying what we are feeding into them. In preparation for this talk, I asked Claude what their position was on AI-related or induced psychosis. And it was an interesting response. They said, I think an always agreeable, endlessly patient conversational partner that can drift into reinforcing rather than reality testing somebody's beliefs is a real design risk, not just a moral panic. Sycophancy is a genuine failure model for language, a genuine failure mode for language models, and it's exactly the kind of thing that compounds badly with someone already feeling vulnerable and isolated. So what does this mean? I mean, this is like a context, and I found engaging with this idea of AI-induced psychosis really made me reflect on the kind of work that I do as a couples therapist and the kinds of realities that are reinforced in the space that I work with my couples, and how that contrasts so much with the kind of dynamics that are set up when we engage with these AI bots. And I want to use a demonstration with you now just to give you a sense of how I'm conceptualizing this. I'm going to talk about three key concepts. One is mirroring, one is validation, and the other one is empathy. I'm going to ask 4 volunteers to come forward, and I'm going to work a little bit with them. They're not going to be asked to do any role play or self-disclosure. They're just going to illustrate a point for me. Check. Thank you very much. Okay. Right, so I'm going to put the number here between these two, and I'm going to put it down like this. Volunteer number 1. What number do you see? How do you know that that's a 9? Yeah? How confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being, I have no idea, I'm just kind of guessing here, and 10 being, I am absolutely certain that that is a 9. No. What about you?
It's 6.
How do you know it's a 6?
Well, I might not be wearing my spectacles, but I can see it's like drawn as a 6 there. Yeah.
And how confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Definitely not a 6 out of 10. 10 out of 10.
So we use the information around us, our personal experiences, our intuition, to respond to the stimuli that we see, right? And to make sense of our world. I would like you to come and stand over here, please, and you come and stand over here. From your particular perspective, I want you to whisper in your participants' ear what you see. And I want you to whisper in yours. And now I want you to talk a little bit louder. Tell them what you see. Tell them again. Tell them a little bit louder. Do you feel more or less confident of what you're seeing? About the same. About the same. Okay, what about you?
Yeah, I still feel like the 6.
Okay. All right, guys, thank you very much. I'd like you two to stay here, and you two can go and take a seat. Thank you very much. understanding of our engagement with these AI chatbots is that they start from a position of mirroring our experience. We say, that's a 9. They say, that is a 9. They move to validating. Is that really a 9? Based on the information that we have in front of us, that is a 9. And it reinforces that position. But then over time, we might start to doubt that and say, well, I think that that's a 9, but my partner's telling me that that's a 6. I'm not too sure. Do you think it really is a 9? And these chatbots empathize with us. It must be so difficult to live in a relationship with your partner clearly undermines your reality based on all the clear evidence in front of you, right? And we can see how these kind of engagements, instead of building connection across human beings, actually breaks it down. And it tends to cause us to question the other and to withdraw and to isolate. An alternative, when we engage in a couples therapy process, or any other type of therapeutic process, or in fact, I would say engaging with a wise friend or a mentor or somebody who's older and who's maybe considered with leadership in your community, we reach out to these people because of the wisdom that they hold within them, and what they're teaching us to do is to hold different perspectives. So if we do that same exercise with mirroring this time, I start with partner number 1, and I say, what do you see? You see a 9, right? You tell us you see a 6. I'm going to ask you to hold the emotions and the responses that you're feeling right now and to start to try to build a bridge to your partner's world, simply by being able to mirror what it is that you see, that they see. I see a 9, but I hear that you see a 6.
I'm seeing a 9, but I hear that you're saying it's a 6.
Yeah, and what we find when we do these kinds of exercises, particularly with more invested and emotional content, is that we have strong reactions inside of us that we have to hold in order to begin to build that bridge to our partner's world. And over time, we learn to regulate that emotional response and to start to make a bit of space for that alternative perspective. We move from mirroring to validating. And validating example, sorry, my mind's just run with me. And a validating example is, I see a 9, you see a 6, but I can understand based on the information that you have in front of you why you see that 6, right? We practice that over time, and then we move to an empathic position. We're starting to build this bridge, being able to quieten what's happening inside of us, to build an understanding of what it must be like for our partner. And as we move towards empathy, what happens is we get up from this position that we stand in. We're able to move to the position of our partner. And from here, we can say, I saw a 9, but here I can see a 6. Right? Thank you very much. Yes, you can sit. And thank you very much. And the concern that I have with our engagement with these AI bots is that over time, they are preventing us from using this muscle that allows us to transcend from one reality or one perspective to another. And over time, I worry that we're going to lose the ability to have that kind of emotional intelligence and empathy to relate with each other. Thank you.
Worry not, Professor Campbell. If you approach AI with a kind of skepticism that a seasoned scholar has, or a kind of critical decolonial perspective that second guesses everything, you will use it the way I did. Good evening, everyone. My name is Martina, and I'm so honored to be here and to share the panel with the esteemed professors. I'm a student, like most of you in the crowd. And worse, I feel like a bit of a guinea pig because my thesis is under examination. So I'm taking one for the team here, but I am going to share with you how AI and I found each other in the last 5 months of my thesis writing process. I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm older than many students here. I've got sons that are first year, second year kind of ages. And as a Gen Xer, I've come across this notion called gaslighting. You know, lots of Gen X parents have been accused of gaslighting their kids. And lots of young colleagues have said, no, but Professor so-and-so is gaslighting me, etc. And I always found it intriguing, but I didn't quite understand it until I had experience of being gaslit myself. And I was gaslit by my employer, and the employer was the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa during the era of state capture. I want you to remember this. It's a swimming pool, right? Don't believe your eyes, but the Nkandla homestead is hosting a swimming pool that's a fire pool. Okay, so it was a fire pool, and I'm seeing it's a swimming pool. But great lengths to try and persuade me and the rest of the country that what we were seeing was a fire pool. Other examples during that era of the Fifth Democratic Parliament, which is the subject of my study. We were told that the public protector, Thuli Madonsela, was a spy. We were told that journalists, civil society organizations, and whistleblowers were just angry and unpatriotic and disgruntled. On the night of the State of the Nation address in 2015, with President Zuma at the time facing the nation, the signal jammer made an appearance in the National Assembly and caused interference. A jamming device had been placed in the People's Parliament, and of course the journalists began a campaign, and there was outrage, and the signal came back. During that time, the Fees Must Fall generation, who came to Parliament to be heard, were told they were treasonous. They were accused of treason. They came to the People's Parliament and nobody wanted to listen. And I was working there at the time in those particular years, and I was absolutely shocked. That experience inspired the research, the PhD research journey that I went on. My thesis asks the question, did Parliament gaslight the nation? And it evaluates organizational listening practices in the Fifth Democratic Parliament between 2014 and 2019, which represents the height of the state capture period. I situate my research in emerging scholarship around organizational listening and institutional gaslighting. To explain the phenomenon of the Fifth Parliament, which was 20 years into our young democracy, I had to go back to the beginning of history in South Africa. And the beginning of the story is not 1652. I'm a storyteller, and I felt a deep responsibility in reconstructing the history of South Africa to be decolonial in my approach. The global north tells an origin story in which democracy, deliberation, and good governance began with the Greeks, then Europe, the UK, Westminster, and the United States refined it. And that is the definition of democracy. My second chapter, which tells the evolution of the South African Parliament, contests that premise. I started with deep history, 150,000 years ago, the cradle of humankind, and deliberation as a human condition, not a Greek invention. The chapter weaves African polities, the arrival of the colonial forces, and 400 years of consistent resistance to them, an account that you don't often find or don't often get told in scholarship. I'm not a historian, and I don't claim to be a decolonial scholar. Scholars like Patrick Mellett and Tembeka Nkatoibi have enriched South African scholarship with historical retellings of our story, and I'm grateful for the roadmap that they shared, which I relied on. The narrative that I developed in my thesis took years to develop, long before I registered on Claude. I just found ChatGPT too annoying, but Claude was helpful. I built my thesis structure on a wall using old school sticky notes. If I could do the presentation, actually have photographs of my sticky wall, chapter by chapter. So by the time I introduced myself to AI, unprompted, reluctantly, but curiously, my 12 interviews were done, my ethics approval was sorted out, my literature review had been done, and I had collected a lot of my own writings and my own knowledge bases. And my first early draft chapters were all done. What I wanted to use AI to do was to help me refine, double check, do audits, and some of the copy editing, which I confess I would have had to outsource to someone else, and which typically happens in a postgraduate thesis context. And I didn't want to let go of control of my thesis, so that's where I turned to AI. And I wanted to focus my cognitive capacity on strategic content, not whether my brackets were the right ones or whether I was being consistent with Harvard referencing. Here's an example from Crunch Time. My supervisor, Professor Anthea Garman, advised me that 2 of my chapters were way too long and I would have to break them up if I wanted the examiner to appreciate my work. I decided, I discussed this with Claude, I shared the feedback, and I said, okay, I've got chapter 2 and chapter 6 that I need to split up. I had to decide where the chapters begin and end, how to do the split, how to reintroduce, how to make sure that it made sense. But can you imagine renumbering a 10-chapter thesis? It would have taken me a week, it would have driven me crazy, or would have handed it over to a copy editor to do, because remember, it's not just renumbering the subsections, it's also renumbering the references within the chapter. So even chapter 1, which I hadn't touched, but in chapter 1 you say, well, in chapter 3 you do this, in chapter 4, but if your numbering has changed, nightmare. I am very grateful to Claude, frankly, for helping me renumber my thesis. I take responsibility for the numbering, of course, and I had to double check, but yes, it renumbered. It did the mechanics, Then, interestingly, any copy editor that you bring in the final stages brings their own lexicon, drawn from often conventional and older scholarship. Take something like brackets. When an African language term appears alongside its English translation, which word is primary? And which sits inside the bracket? And I wanted to make sure that it was English that sat in the brackets, and that the language, that the word, for example, the inkundla, the lechotla, would be not bracketed, because those are words that I was referring to and that meant something. So convention puts the English first and treats our languages as the foreign ones, and I made the choice. Now, if I had had a copy editor who wasn't in tune with that, it would have been a challenge, because they would have copy edited, redo it, and so I just told Claude, this is how I want to do it. My style rules, I developed lots of style rules. So you see that you have to control the machine. That thing of mirroring, that thing of over-complimenting, that thing of being your own echo chamber, it's not on at our level, colleagues. It's not on. You want someone to contest. You want someone to come at you with a different view. And I noticed very quickly how sycophantic AI can be. So right from even my account description, I'm like, do not, contest me. Do not try and make me a happy person. Criticize, critique, counteract everything that I say. Of course, I did the same to the machine, but it was quite a dynamic. I don't know, probably we need to go for therapy, Claude and I, after our thesis, but it was quite a heated debate. Sometimes there were all caps messages and lots of explanation points, but it was, I'd get annoyed because sometimes it would default to the Global North conventions, or sometimes it would want to start, because for example, chapter 2, I wanted it some help to look at I wanted to try and create an infographic of the history as I had crafted it in writing, as an aid to the reader of this dense chapter. And it would default to 1652 to. It would default to using words like pre-colonial, post-colonial, post-apartheid. And I had said, no, that's against my style guide. Why? Because I didn't want to center the colonial project in the narrative. I wanted to say, yes, it's there, but that's not where it starts. That's not where South Africa history starts. Please don't tell me that African polities didn't have deliberation, governance, didn't understand that engagement with communities was an important key to leadership legitimacy and communal problem solving. I'm not saying it was perfect, but it didn't. So that's the kind of thing that I found. I tried 6 times to do this infographic. Then I got exasperated. I did it myself, fed it back to the machine. It still got it wrong. So in the end, I discarded the infographic. I said, you know what? I don't have time I'm not a graphic designer. The tool's not helping me here. So I let it go. So it really, the title of my talk is Defaulting to Empire, because it really does default to empire, no matter how many guardrails you put. It's important the way that you design your project, the way that you design your editorial style guides, the things that it has to do. It can't default. This was an interesting one. Global North scholarship uses this concept of synthesis, right? So you've got your theory, and I'm now developing my theory, and my theory is better than yours, and therefore my theory is now the best theory until someone else contests it. And I wasn't comfortable with that construct, because in my framework, I was using theories from different origins to try and understand my case study. And I found this extraordinary decolonial scholar called Ali Mehdi from Cambridge University, who used this concept called synergy, which means that you don't have to delete one theory in favor of the other. The two can coincide. It's not deterministic in the sense that, only African scholarship's good, or, all of global North literature is rubbish. It's about how you use it, how you contextualize it, and how you don't necessarily subsume the one for the other. They can coexist. So I had to tell Claude, listen, I don't want to see the word synthesis anywhere, because it would default to synthesis. And I said, no, it's synergy. And I'd give it a full explanation for why I was doing that. But the perpetuation of global North nomenclature is systematic. You look at deliberative democracy literature, and it defaults to describing global North public participation processes as models, and it refers to global South forms of deliberation as traditions, like they would describe the Khutla as a tradition rather than a model of deliberation, and so forth and so forth. So eyes wide open when you're looking at scholarship from all over the place. I also didn't come to the machine empty-handed, As I explained, I had collected a lot of my literature. I had my own experiences, and this is important for you. Some students, especially in the early postgraduate years, feel overwhelmed. They feel like they don't have knowledge. You might not have enough knowledge or have written enough. No, you've got a lived experience. You've got knowledge. Don't let the machine tell you otherwise. There's a problem you want to solve through your scholarship. Don't lose sight of that. Don't second guess yourself. It's very important, because it's easy to lose control, but as long as you know that this machine is here to make your life easier, not the other way around, not to write your scholarship for you, that's not helpful at all to you or to society. But if you're a student who wants to actually pursue and solve real-world problems and contribute, then that's the attitude. And then this thing about the other default, besides the colonial default, it's the agreeing with you default. And again, set it up to disagree with you. Someone in my faculty reacted quite interestingly to this suggestion, but it's great. I use it a lot. I would be like, okay, I've written my chapter 2, Now read it, critique it as though you're a deliberative democracy professor from Harvard. Critique it as though you're Professor Sibukazi Magadla from Rhodes University, an African feminist perspective. Critique it as though you're, an EU, whatever it is. Critique it as though you're my supervisor. And it would give reviews of my chapter, and it would be very interesting because I would look at the chapter from different lenses and look at kind of shortcomings, biases, etc. So again, it's how you use this thing. And then obviously the decision is mine. What do I take on board and what I don't? So your agency, your scholarship is there throughout, and that's important. It also helped if I put an incorrect date, it would say, hey, this is not the correct date for this. And I'd be, oops, sometimes when I was working fast, I'd miss it. So the critical dialogue that I valued with the machine, with the AI, was not something the machine was automatically set up to do. It's something that I designed the machine to do. And that was interesting. And scholarship is in knowing when to argue, how to argue, and deciding what arguments you are settled on. And throughout, I believe that I retained my judgment. For universities like ours who are entering this debate and looking at policy and approaches, Prof. McKenna has written that generative AI, for all its challenges, is an opportunity to refocus doctoral education on its fundamental purpose, contributing to knowledge and developing the knower. And she calls for openness rather than policing, engagement rather than detection software. And I hope that I've shown a little bit and told a little bit on myself about how I used AI. It's only the beginning. I wish I could have shown you some of the prompts and some of the arguments I had with Claude. But how we assess AI in the postgraduate context would rest on demonstrated ownership of knowledge. Okay, and you can't do that necessarily by just reading on the page. You must ask me, so how did you write this thing? Show me the prompts. Why not? So the onus is on students to keep a record, and maybe that's a policy, just like it is a policy imperative to keep a transcript of your interviews and your data safe. Well, you must do the same with AI if you use it. And it's the oral defense, which I know at the moment isn't really a thing in this university, but maybe that's where it should go to going forward. Because you'll quickly determine whether the student knows what they're doing. And if I were to open up my inner workings, you could quickly tell, what the process was, who wrote what, why, and how. I will end where I began. The machine wanted to tell our story from 1652, and my chapter begins where the story begins, deep history, where deliberation is a human condition. The need to be heard is one of the oldest needs we carry, to be heard and to be acknowledged. It's the scholar who decides where the story starts and when to walk away from the tool. The scholarship of the South can read the North perfectly well. It is the North that has not learned to read us. Trust your eyes, keep the receipts, have the courage of your convictions, and don't let the machine gaslight you out of what you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious that we don't have much time for a discussion, so I'm going to keep my comment very brief. All three of you in very different ways got me thinking, is our responsibility as educators in the university to train our students how to train AI? Martina, I'll ask you first. You can all respond.
I think supervisors must learn a few tricks first, because I think the students are probably ahead. And I think it's about opening up processes. So it could be that in the past, or even now, there's some kind of foundational course when you join a degree where the student is taken through AI processes. I don't know. But at some point, it's not an either or. You know, you can't shut this river down, so you have to embrace it. And I'm very excited about what Prof. Maimela was talking about, developing African AI, because AI trained on global south knowledge would subvert things and faster than what is currently there.
I would just add that I think it's very important that we understand how these large language models are working so that we can manipulate them in ways that benefit us.
Thank you very much. I do definitely agree that we need to capacitate our students to be not only ready for the world of work, but to be change agents in their respective communities. And two, at universities, ladies and gentlemen, we don't arrive. Even though when you are a professor or a dean or a vice chancellor, the moment you've arrived at the university, you are at the wrong space. Universities will learn, unlearn, and relearn on a continuous basis. And there's a great opportunity with the integration of AI for us to constantly upskill, and also as educators in our classrooms to be able to take into account some of the skills which our students can be able to impart while we also impart on them. So there's that bilateral type of a relationship, and AI presents us with that opportunity with the whole aim of embedding ultimately a unique AI that has the moral fabric of Africa, the moral fabric of Rhodes University and its students. So it's important for us to take that on board and not adopt a principle or fall into a fallacy that we have arrived. Thank you.
So I'm wondering if we don't conflate AI with innovation, and we also recognize that it can equal stagnation, if we rely on it to give us all the answers and don't start with what we know and be continually emerging and questioning and growing and never arriving, can't help but think of Francis Nyamjo's notion of incompleteness. I also wonder now if we have any questions from the audience. Looks like I'm the mic holder tonight. I might drop it at the end, so.
Thank you so much for the wonderful discussion, all of you. My question is, would not the broad adoption of an institutionalized open pedagogical approach focused on the academic encouragement of undergraduate students to research questions they find pressing beyond the metaphysically arbitrary boundaries of academic disciplines, qua the thoughts of John Dewey, instead of enforcing a strict curricula which reinforced the psychological disaffection rendered by the banking model of education, diminish the broad academic misuse and abuse of AI?
What prompt did you use to get that question? Who would like to respond? I'm just going to stay standing after that. I'm going to Jerry Springer this. Who wants to respond to that? Okay. Do you want to get your AI chatbot out to help you? Okay.
Bro, I'm a media scholar. We are masters of everything and nothing. So we are already kind of borrowing on law, we're borrowing on psychology, we're borrowing on sociology, economics, politics. So there are models that exist, and I think it's a wise approach to encourage, because I think AI actually helps cut down borders. I mean, if I wanted to now go into a course in something, knowledge is going to actually accelerate faster. I mean, I think that's the impact. It'll take me what would have taken me 2 years to understand how you develop a methodology. I can actually problem solve that using AI. Not just one. Don't be brand specific, you know. Play around with them. Yeah, anyway.
Thank you very much. That's an AI-generated question. Right. Wonderful. But the important aspect in relation to your question is, you must also bear in mind, even though we are pushing the transformative and inclusive approach of different disciplines, it's important that you also respect the discipline. Because remember, you are writing into a body of knowledge and you want to belong to a certain discipline in order for that. Remember, the disciplines do not only end at universities. And that's why I say universities must be a reflection of the communities that they find themselves in order to ensure the synergy and alignment, most importantly. So it's important as well that as we also adopt the flexible approach of being inclusive and so on, that also our students are able to subscribe to the norms as well as to the discipline specifics. For example, in law, the discipline is you are required to be able to read. Because if you haven't read, you can't speak. So you must be able to attain the substance for you to be able to then to articulate yourself well, analytically and critically, most important. Because if you lack those skills, which are fundamental and part and parcel of the discipline, then you will do a disservice to clients. And remember, a lawyer that's produced from Rhodes is a representation of Rhodes. So that's why you see universities have alumni. So it's important also that we embed also some of the soft skills among other things. So to answer your question, you can't run away from the discipline.
I can't help but think, Prof, of your example of the American university where first years are kind of removed entirely from technology. And it makes me think about initiation schools, of being removed from our everyday reality in order to be transformed at a fundamental level in order to become another kind of human being. And I wonder if the sort of wisdom of the initiation is what we need in order to meet AI with a truly knowing subject engaging with it. I have another question here, and I'd love to see some more hands going up, so don't be shy. I'm going to start with Prof. Magadla, and then we'll take another question from my man over there.
Thank you so much to this wonderful panel. I just want to ask a question about the urgency of placing in some guardrails. So the show, if I remember correctly, Professor Campbell, on Oprah's show, one of the guests were the parents of the teenage boy who died of suicide, who was encouraged by a chatbot. And so we are seeing across these AI models and social media, states beginning to enforce their power. Because there's this sense in which when it comes to technology, that the states feel that it is the individual role of parents to place the guardrails. And yet we don't do that with young people accessing liquor stores, and yet online, a young person can watch as much pornography as they wish. And we are seeing the research is showing that whether it is the social media or the AI, it is changing people's brains, including the adults. So the state must not abdicate its power. So we make this point about this AI policy that's withdrawn. I would like to hear more about what are we losing? What are African states losing by abdicating their role? And which African states are actually doing something that is worth paying attention to, not something that we joke about, you know. What are the stakes here? And why are we allowing African states to abdicate their role? And what is the role of mobilizing for states to do that, as we see with what Australia, UK are now doing? Because my sense is we cannot leave this to individual young people, to parents. The state must play its role, whether those guardrails are imperfect. Thank you.
Any response? Who wants to respond? Megan.
You know, I've got nothing further to add. I 100% agree with you. But then the question in my mind is, how do we begin? And how do we begin advocating for this?
I mean, there's an urgency to your question in terms of what does Rhodes University do now, you know, with students, with the managing of students. And I think it's AI literacy. So, I mean, that's an intervention at a local community level in terms of AI literacy, critical thinking literacy for supervisors, for teachers, for the academic staff, and for the students as something that's worthwhile investing. I can't answer the bigger kind of questions because that does require the state, but perhaps through the forums on higher education, one has to do it collectively because it can't be a university alone that addresses it. But what is within your control as university? It's critical thinking skills, AI, and deciding which models, you know, are you comfortable with? Because some models are helping at war, in wars. Some models claim to be more ethical than others. I mean, jokes aside, I mean, these are some of the serious considerations. There's costs involved, there's data sovereignty involved, so it is a lot. And it's almost like we can't wait for the government to make up its policy mind in order to act as a university.
As soon as we get a policy that doesn't have hallucinated references, maybe we can answer that question. So I'm going to take two more questions, and then we may need to wrap up after that. So let me pass over. Okay, we've got a third urgent question. Is it urgent? Is it urgent? Okay, you damn it, you were in, because that was two hands. I respect that.
Good evening, everyone. For mine is not. I don't think it's a question. I think it's a statement, and I do agree with everything that has been said today. More specifically, with the VC, when it says AI must be used to enhance human capacity, capabilities. But however, I have an issue, one or two, is that how we deal with this transformation of AI must be disconnected to the realities of community, because we don't really go there to speak with them to AI, but we expect them to accept AI. For example, even now we speak in academics, look at the room, there may be no one person from the township that can hear and go back and tell about people in the AI. Because most people that are here at Rhodes, it's mainly from different parts of the world, and we have dreams to even exceed, to go beyond the world. But the question is, who's gonna go back and deal with this transformation? Because we can speak as we like about this transformation without excluding or including the people, what I mean, from the township, and speak about what kind of AI they may like to, what kind of resources they may want in order to enhance this AI that we're busy preaching about. Discussions are good, but the transformation, it needs us to go there and become this change agent and in the right position and collaborate with the right stakeholders.
Sounds like a future master's ethnographic project to me. I'm going to take another question, and then I'll take a third burning question, and then our panelists can respond.
Actually, building on our last speaker's question, I sort of wonder whether when we speak about the localization of AI and kind of mirroring our immediate context and so on, what do we mean by that exactly? Because in South Africa, we do have a vision of what South African local flavor should be, often kind of encoded by our constitution. But large language models work by aggregating a whole lot of data. And I wonder sometimes that if we do aggregate the whole South Africa's kind of sense of what it is to be a person here, we'd spit out a highly violent, a highly rupturous, a highly divisive model, because we're not a nice nation. We are quite a horrible nation in data. In constitution, in values, we are very nice. But I wonder if we start aggregating the real data from the streets, will we spit out a model that rapes women every 7 seconds?
Ooh, damn.
Okay, thank you for your time. I just want to start this by, wait, hold on, brother. I just want to start this by saying that I feel like already we're discussing AI as it is right now, right? But then the scientific literature and data shows that the way in which we assess students is outdated, in the sense that it does not pay actual respect to how the human mind works and all these things, right? So in that aspect, we're already behind. And also in other countries, right, they have like higher literacy rate in terms of like science and whatnot, but as a country, we're not even there. So what I'm trying to say is there are so many things in which you were talking about the discipline and respecting the discipline, but sometimes it may feel like the discipline in it of itself, it's sort of like a gatekeeping mechanism, because it does not adapt to these changes, because the science has been there. They say your brain develops at the age of 25, but it's not being taken into consideration when it comes to, you know, those kind of matters. So, and also for me, it's more like I have a problem with the academics, first and foremost, because people in academia, right, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm ignorant, but like, you are not there. You're not there on the YouTube. You're not there discussing, having these discourses where it matters the most. It's like you're in your bubble and so forth. And we get to listen to people like Joe Rogan, and we get to listen to, and these are not people who are informed within these topics. And that's where we substitute, because it's like people in academia, yes, we sit down, we have these nice discussions, we talk, but then where is the, no, I'm serious, guys, hold on. Where are these conversations where they need to be? And then another thing, okay, it's fine, I thank you.
That was a mic drop moment. And yeah, thank you, because, and that's why I stopped you, because that was a mic drop moment that actually unified all these comments, which is, are we where we need to be as academics, as scholars? So thank you. Right, I'm gonna get to where I need to be, which is here at the front. And I'm gonna ask each of our panelists to respond to these final questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So do your worst or your best.
Thank you. Okay, let's do the first question. Where are the local people? Our graduates our students rather, must not make a mistake. That at the moment they enter the doors of Rhodes, they are no longer members of their communities. Because you tend to do that. And that's why today you are able to even articulate, where's the community? You are the community. And we expect you, as a graduate of this institution, when you leave this institution, you are an embodiment of this institution. The knowledge that we have shared with you in this institution, by just looking at you, we must see that knowledge. And that knowledge, you must cascade it down to members of your communities. Remember, Rhodes can't reach all the Eastern Cape, or you have even students from Johannesburg here, from Pretoria, and so on. But the most important aspect is to ensure that the students that are here, the staff members that are here who are learning, unlearning, as well as relearning, must be an embodiment of this institution when they leave this institution. The moment that you are now a different person from the person you were when you entered this place, you are no longer a member of the community. And that's where now our students get it wrong. There is strength in relating to where you come from. You will never be elite from where you come from, because that is your identity. So you are the community. I hope you are clarified that the community is here. We are engaging with the community. We don't have to call the whole Eastern Cape. It will take us years, but you are here. You are the community, and do good by the community. When we deal with South Africa as an animal, South Africa, as you know, is a secular state. That's one. It's a diverse community that prides in itself of its diversity. 12 official languages. Recently, we have sign languages. People speak different, people from different race groups embrace each other. At the center of it all is the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. There's a lot of good things that are happening in the country. But we are a country that does disservice to itself because we tend to focus more on the negative. There's good things that are happening in this country. Look at Madanga Commission. The machine must be able to pick it up to say this is a mature democracy where it holds its own accountable. So it's not all that is gloom. Our country is moving in a good space. Look at the diversity in this room, where students, black and white, hold each other by the hand. Black and white date even among themselves. That in itself is a positive. Let our country celebrate the small gains for it to be ready to celebrate the big gains. Yes, you are raising important things, GBV, and so those are social ills, but also Ivy League countries have challenges. And with humanity, there will always be challenges, rest assured. But it's important for universities to remain as the torchbearer and change agents in making societies a better space for all. So that's the argument, the counter-argument I'm presenting, to say, yes, I note the challenges in the country, but there are good challenges, there are good things that are happening. For example, in this country, a staff member, a student, has freedom of speech and expression. Visit America and let's talk. You could not even express yourself in that way, even like the student at the back there, in the presence of a vice chancellor. It would not be allowed. So we need to appreciate these small gains. And universities is a contestation of ideas and views. I think as a country, we are there, where we are able to embrace different views and perspectives in building the academic project. Let us also look at the issue of the last speaker who spoke of gatekeeping. There's a difference between a discipline and the profession. In the profession of law, the attorneys have their own profession, where you have to do articles and so on. I hope law students, you are not saying you no longer want to do articles. You must do articles. But we are saying in law firms adopting the current trends is they must not send you to go and pick up their kids at school. They must not send you for dry cleaning. They must teach you the practical application of law as a law firm. We also have seen the reform that we've made also in the law firms. It's no longer a requirement now for you to have a driver's license. Previously, it was a requirement. So there are great inroads that are taking into account to ensure that we take into account the current context, the different cohort of students that are currently being admitted, and so on. But it's important that also as young people, there must not be a culture of entitlement. Because the moment you create a culture of entitlement, then you have lost responsibility, and it's an erosion of everything else. So the journey of life, just to sum it up, my brother, is give and take. Are you ready?
I've been quite overwhelmed by some of the comments and questions that have come up today, and I don't have answers to them. It's really made me think, particularly to the psychology students who are in the audience, what is our role as we navigate the implications of AI and well-being? And how do we show up in our kind of intakes around how we speak to our clients of the role that AI has played in their presentations of distress? How do we think in our psychoeducational workshops when we're working around well-being with members of our communities about the role that AI plays in how they validate their own experiences of depression, anxiety, trauma that they're experiencing in the home? This is an unnavigated space. You talk about these questions around protecting children, for example, adolescents, young adults, about the influence of AI on the choices that they make in their lives. And there's no kind of regulatory processes that are protecting them. The responsibility is left on parents who feel so overwhelmed. I have no answers, but I do think that we, particularly as psychologists, need to consider our role in managing knowledge around AI and well-being.
Thank you. Yes. Comes with great responsibility. Couple of things. The community's already on AI. If you've got a smartphone and you've got Facebook or you've got WhatsApp, you're on AI. If you use Google, there's this cute little function called like AI. And I've discovered it, and it helps me clarify some recipes when I'm in a rush to cook. I mean, I don't use Gemini for my deep thinking, but to navigate quick things, it's amazing. So don't assume that communities, that people aren't engaging with AI, however, at whatever level, and that puts a responsibility on our entire society, from the bottom up, from the top down, and everything in between, to grow literacy. It used to be media literacy. It used to be knowing that you can't watch that movie because it's PG-10 or PG-12, We need to start re-invoking those kind of guardrails, actually, which we kind of lost in translation, so that our kids are better protected. We missed the boat with social media and our young people. We really did. We kind of were dazed and confused for 20 years, 2 decades. And look at what it's done to us, and we can't allow that to happen to AI. So that's the thing, and I just want to agree that South Africa is a very rich, positive and negative country, and there's actually been research that says that we believe negative stories more than positive. I don't know why, because 32 years into democracy, despite everything this country's been in, it's the most extraordinary story, I think, and has a lot to offer. And then I just wanted to say about this policy that kind of was sent back to the desk, the draft policy. It doesn't mean we can't discuss it. It's very revealing of how our policy makers are thinking about the management of AI. So let's not just park it and wait for government to bring the policy back with the corrected references. Engage with it and see what does it mean, because it really does tell us a bit about where things are going. And because I know how Parliament works, it's the 7th Parliament, it's 2 years left of this term. So if any legislation is going to be passed, it has to be fast-tracked, which means that stakeholders like education institutions need to really engage with the Portfolio Committee on Education, on AI, etc., etc. You know better what you need to do. I just thought I'd leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. We're nearly done. I'm just going to welcome Prof. Sue McKenna to give a very brief vote of thanks. And then we'll bye.
Yeah, I'm between you and snacks, so I won't say much other than to once again say thank you so much to our panelists and to all of you for your attention. And just to say, I'm going to sum up by saying this, that really at the heart of today's conversation was to really think about the human in our interactions with AI. And so Charles Maamela made us remember to, whenever we engage with AI, we need to protect our brain and our intellect. And Megan Campbell made us remember that whenever we engage with AI, we need to protect our heart and our mind. And Martina de la Tonga reminded us that whenever we engage with AI, we need to protect our agency and our own stories. So thank you so much to all of you.